Good day and welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. I'm John Marino, and it is another Cup of Joe political show here on Westchester Talk Radio. We are brought to you, made possible by our good friends at Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center in Buchanan. They promise to power Westchester, promise to power us up right through April of 2021. By Lipolis Electric, don't be left in the dark. And by Hightower Westchester. At Hightower Westchester, they manage your wealth to a fiduciary standard. And by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction. Here now on the Cup of Joe political show, we are joined by New York State Assemblyman, 91st District, representing the Sound Shore area, Steve Otis. His area runs from New Rochelle right down to the Bronx border and all the way up through the Sound Shore area, moves, cuts inland a little bit, even touches the Purchase area, town of North Castle as well. Steve Otis, great to have you with us. Great to talk to you again in a different venue than what we used to do a few years back. I know it's been a busy time for you and all of your colleagues in Albany. We've had a pandemic. We've had the social justice issue and incidents happening again and again in that area and more. How has it been for you personally?
Well, I think we have the world sort of in turmoil right now between the pandemic, which is basically been most of what I have been doing since the beginning of March, is helping people get their unemployment insurance, helping school districts, small businesses, local governments navigate how they're going to deal in this new situation. So there's a lot of troubleshooting. I was just on the phone a little earlier today with one of the nursing home heads of a nursing home assisted living facility with a particular issue that they had. So lots of problem solving that is difficult but rewarding. All of the Westchester Assembly people and senators are on a daily conference call with the governor's office to go through what needs to be addressed, where we need things tailored for our needs here in Westchester. So it's good work, it's hard work, but I think the underlying message is that even as we're now opening up, to follow the good words of the governor especially, which is that opening up doesn't mean going back to normal, and that the virus is still out there. It is a very dangerous virus for which you need to be wearing a mask, you need to be keeping those distances, you need to be doing the kinds of precautions that are recommended even as activity increases, because they don't, when I say they, the medical community don't even still fully understand all of the elements of the virus. I've spoken to people who have survived it, and there are a lot of, even when, if you get through it, if you're lucky enough to get through it, there are post-episode residual issues that one has to deal with. It just doesn't go away and you're back to normal. So everyone should be careful, but trying to help some small businesses navigate getting opened, and the issues that come up every week is different.
How do you navigate the needs of, say, downstate, Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk, the lower Hudson Valley, obviously, knowing that New Yorkers in other areas have different needs? How do you navigate the downstate needs with the way upstate needs, for example, knowing that we all have to work together as one?
Well, I think that the state and the Department of Health and the governor's office did work up a pretty wise set of metrics to determine by region when you can open, and so and different phases, and it's based upon number of new infections, number of hospitalizations, number of deaths, availability of hospital beds in the area to deal with if there's a new surge, and the tracing element to track when there is the new cases. Are we tracing and trying to identify where they were sourced from? So the regional part of it makes sense from that way, but around the state, some of the same issues come up wherever you are. I was dealing with and trying to help with some of my colleagues a small business that's on the Purchase College campus, an outdoor recreation business called Outdoor Boundless Adventures, and they are a rope obstacle course, platform obstacle course outside. It's an aerial obstacle course. There's another one on Long Island. There's another one in the Adirondacks. And we had to sort of walk through a process about what their protocols would be to make sure that the people at the state, the Department of Health, were comfortable with them opening up, and were able to do that. So some of the issues are universal around the state, and that really didn't fall into the phases. It fell into, do they have the protocols that people are comfortable with. But we had issues like a jewelry store saying, they're saying stores now can do business, but it has to be curbside, and jewelry stores are basically saying, we can't really do curbside jewelry store stuff. People have to come in and they can adjust. They can let people come in and make sure they have a limited number of people in their store. So everything is a case-by-case basis, and lots of troubleshooting as these issues come up, and try to be helpful.
One of your main focuses in the Assembly is education, statewide and locally here in Westchester. Here we are now, middle of June, and we still have the conversation about when can schools reopen again? What do you see right now about schools reopening? How can this be done? How soon can we maybe get everybody back, or is that a pipe dream at this point?
Well, it is being reviewed in a few different ways. The Board of Regents has set up a set of hearings that are coming up within the education community statewide in the next few weeks, and they're analyzing what is going to work and what is not going to work. The Department of Health is certainly going to be weighing in on this, and the governor has set up his own task force to look at these issues. I would say this, that the options are either full opening in September, but full opening again is not going to be the way school was before, that the schools are going to have to limit how many people are in spaces at the same time, and change some of their protocols. So it's a real stress on the schools to figure this out. There may be a mixture of a phased opening and some continued remote learning. That's what these different studies are going to work out. But it's not going to be the same, because it is clearly not going to be safe to have so many people in a condensed space at the same time, whether what they're going to do about masks or not masks. What the science tells us is outdoor spaces are a lot safer than indoor spaces, and what the air circulation is going to be, and this is how the virus can spread. So it's getting tracked. We're not going to know. And I think I talk to school superintendents on a regular basis. They are preparing for a variety of options. They're understanding that they may be remote, they may be mixture, they may be everyone's at school, but if everyone's at school, how is it going to be different? How are they going to use their spaces differently so that it's safe for the kids, for the staff, for the teachers?
And then we get into the issue of funding, money. The state is not taking in, Westchester, all these localities around the state are not taking in anything close to the kind of tax money because of the pandemic that is usually taken in. And then we get to the issue of local budgets, state budgets. A decade ago, during the Great Recession, education was hit badly in New York State, as it was in many states across the country. And we hear again, education may be hit badly again, money-wise, because we're not getting enough tax money in. And maybe this is one reason why we're pushing reopening the way we are.
Well, I think the number one thing as it relates to school funding is, and this is the number one effort from everyone in state government, is the next federal stimulus package needs to backfill all 50 states in this crisis, but especially the education component. When we adopted the budget earlier this year, instead of the usual increase in state aid for school districts, it was level funding, which is very unusual. And you harken back to the years in 2008 and again in 2001, and we have bad years in state aid for education that are generally going with the economy. Right now, if we don't get that federal help, what was an even budget in state aid, which is sort of a hit as it is for school districts, will become some level of a cut. There are calls for new revenues at the state level, which I think we are going to have to look at, but we first need the state money the state getting money from the feds, even if the state were to find ways to raise new revenues, that money isn't going to come online in time to deal with immediate cuts that would happen this year. The other thing is, in dealing with the pandemic, school districts, they have new costs to adjust to this new environment. It isn't as if they're a standard operating procedure. For them to reorganize space, keep everyone safe, it's going to be more resources that they're going to need to be able to accomplish that task as well.
And then we look at things like athletics in schools, for example, extracurricular activities, extra after-school programs, things like that. These seem to be when schools have to reduce their services, what they provide financially. These seem to be the areas that get hit first. Is there a way to maybe prevent the brunt from not being so bad?
I think it's the federal money, but as it relates to the athletics, we saw a decision from the state body that does the high school athletics, saying that conditioning training can happen this summer, and I think that teams and coaches are going to have those things happen in a way that is safe, and there's guidance information out on that. In fact, as it relates to recreation more broadly, we're talking on June 18th, and just today the governor's office issued a new fact sheet on a variety of recreation issues. It's a long document. It gives a little more detail and a roadmap on all sorts of recreation activities that will help guide where we're going. One of the questions we're getting is, what about indoor tennis courts? Outdoors, okay. What about indoor tennis courts? What about ice rinks want to open? And a lot of the kids programs want ice rinks open. When are we going to get to those in the recreation time frame?
Steve Otis, Westchester Assemblyman, 91st District in Westchester, covering the Sound Ashore area of the county. Steve, you work with the Clean Water Program in the Assembly, and I know that's something near and dear to you. How are you able to work with that program, make it part of what's going on now, too, as we recover from this pandemic?
Well, clean water is an important piece of our public health and safety issue, because we need clean water. But clean water was a real challenge for local governments. Many local governments in Westchester were either under consent decrees with New York State DEC or the EPA to fix their pipes, to fix drinking water systems, and yet these are very expensive projects. And so in 2015, I helped come up with an idea, a proposal to create a new program at the state level that would provide grant money to local governments to pay for a chunk of these projects to make them more affordable for taxpayers. So to date, after 5 years, and with the great support of Governor Cuomo and his environmental agencies, we have provided almost $1.2 billion in grants statewide, additional property tax savings of $2.5 billion, $45.5 million in grants to Westchester communities. It has created 67,000 new jobs, and the program is going to go on for, it's fully appropriated for the next fiscal year, and it is money that is really needed because the projects are important, but also the funding is important. Communities were not able to afford to do these projects before. Now they are.
And this would be part of our move to a green economy, step by step also, too.
Well, we need clean air. We need clean water. It is all related. But in Westchester, we have good drinking water. We want to keep it that way. We have our sanitary sewer systems, and those pipes need to function in a way where we're not polluting groundwater, we're not polluting drinking water, we're not polluting the Hudson River or Long Island Sound. So a lot of good projects that will happen in the next few years, and I work very closely with the state agencies involved with this. They've done a great job of implementing the program and making sure the money gets to the local governments as quickly as possible.
Now, nowadays we deal with a pandemic, which just happened, and we're still in the midst of that. We still deal with something that happened almost a decade ago, too, besides the Great Recession, which we talked about. Storm recovery. We have at night 5 or 6 nights a week, all this work going on the Holland Tunnel, Superstorm Sandy recovery work and repair and improvement work almost a decade later. You work very closely with storm recovery locally in Westchester and statewide too. And we are headed toward now really into the hurricane season, the tropical storm season. In the midst of the pandemic, we still have to keep an eye on the weather, and you help us do that.
Well, it's an issue that I go way back with. When I was a mayor, we did involved with FEMA on
Mayor of Rye, by the way.
Mayor of the city of Rye, and we were in a project, a program called Project Impact. It was a FEMA program. The whole philosophy was for local governments to become more resilient in a natural disaster, to prepare, to have a response plan, and the governor had a similar program under his leadership called called New York Rising, and New York, the governor's office of storm recovery has done great projects around the state. The most important thing, I think, for Westchester, and something the Public Service Commission has been very helpful on, and I've been an advocate for, is increasing the standards for public utilities for their storm preparedness and for their ability to have manpower on the ground quickly after a storm. We've had some storms where it took days to get the mutual aid from other parts of the country, and I think we will going forward see that we've already seen better response from our utilities in New York State. They're making sure that they have the manpower here quicker. Sometimes they stage in advance of the storm's arrival, and these are things that we've done in cooperation with the legislature, the governor's office, the Public Service Commission, and the utility companies have worked with increasing their planning for these events. But it's so important in this day and age. There's an electrical outage, people want to have their electricity back on. They don't want to wait days and days. It should be back on within 24 hours, and that is our goal, and I think we're better positioned to do that going forward.
When you were mayor of Rye, you learned and saw many things, obviously, and this has helped you in the assembly become what's known across the assembly as the problem solver. Steve Otis from Westchester, you know how to solve problems locally here in Westchester, and yet work with other governments around the state to give them what they need too.
Well, I think that I'm a big intermunicipal cooperation person. I was very involved when I was mayor with the Westchester Municipal Officials Association, and it's actually in Albany. My best friend in the assembly is another former mayor. His name is John McDonald, and he was the mayor of Coast, and we are the only two former city mayors in the state assembly. We call ourselves the Mayor's Caucus. We sort of pride ourselves in trying to look at things from a local government perspective. During the pandemic, I've been working with the different local governments as issues have come up, and they learn from each other also. And so the intermunicipal cooperation, I think, is always a key, and I try and facilitate that with the local officials that I work with. They're a great group. We have really good local officials in Westchester, and they're on the front line of so many issues, whether it's the pandemic, whether it is storm relief. And they have a challenge right now because they're going to have tight budgets like everybody else. And so they're looking at loss of sales tax revenue, a loss of hotel tax revenue for communities that have a local hotel occupancy tax. And so they're going to be challenged to provide services at the same time, and everyone's going to have to work together.
And Westchester has been hurt by the loss of the hotel tax money, too.
Absolutely. The county, and we actually have a bunch of communities that have municipal hotel taxes. I represent the village of Rye Brook, and so they have, and I actually was helpful in getting their hotel tax passed in 2011. They have two hotels that for about the last decade have been providing them about $600,000 to $700,000 in revenue that they use to provide for most of their capital program. Instead of going to the taxpayers on the property tax or borrowing, they had the hotel tax revenue. Arrowwood looks like it's closed and not going to come back. Rydetown Hilton has been closed. So they're looking at a big hit on revenue, and that story is not dissimilar from other communities in Westchester that relied on hotel tax revenue. We're going to have to help them ride through this the best we can, but they're on the front lines. They're going to be looking at what they can do on tightening services, which is not easy. People need these services.
Interesting you bring up the mayor's caucus in Albany, because I've always seen you as the prototype of the old expression, the old adage, all politics is local, and that's what it is.
Absolutely true. And one thing about the pandemic, I miss going to all the events that I used to go to. I'm somebody that would try and hit the civic events, the not-for-profit events, and go around as many of us do. And because when you see people and you go to events, you learn about issues. You learn about new legislation you could be introducing, problems that we could be solving, budget issues. It's by being out there, people come up to you. So the COVID situation has really restricted part of how we do our job, and it's also sort of frustrating on a human being basis. I think we all miss being able to see people and see people in person. It is something that we're going to have to be patient with, but it is frustrating because we're human beings. We're social beings.
People like when their elected representative or representatives show up, like you do, like George Latimer, the county executive, does, and so many more around this county. Westchester, I think, is known for having elected officials who go out and, quote, make the scene, unquote. Even for somebody just to walk up to you and just to vent about something makes them feel better.
Well, it's good, and it's enjoyable. I like people, so I like seeing people, but it also, as I said, it's a key part of doing one's job is to be there where people who maybe would not think to pick up the phone or send you a letter on an issue, they come and they tell you something, and suddenly you might have an idea for a new piece of legislation.
Steve Otis, Westchester Assemblyman, 91st District, Sound Shore area. Now, Mr. Otis, Steve, big issue that's come up recently, of course, is the social justice issue, effective policing, what that's all about. Everything that's gone on in Minneapolis and Atlanta, we've seen and heard stories about instances in other places through the years as well, too, and either things that have happened recently that have come out, like the Arbery situation down in Georgia and the situation in Kentucky with Breonna Walker. So much has happened through the years and through the decades with this that finally we've gotten around to sitting down and talking about maybe police forces can do things a different way, restructure what they do, how they do it, and still be as effective as they have been. You worked in Albany recently with the other assembly members, state senators, with the governor to put together a reform package for police reform that hopefully will allow policing to still be as effective as it has been and yet meet the needs of so many different communities.
Well, it is an issue that it actually defies logic because we have seen some of these incidents go back decades. I think the Rodney King incident was 1991 or
30 years ago already. Hard to believe.
But it is. I think that there's a real consensus that we're not going to let this moment pass without action, and that we've had too many times, oh, this is horrible, and then nothing happens. Unacceptable. And so the legislature, we met last week and passed a package of bills. Some of these bills had passed the assembly previously, but now strong support for things that provide more accountability to the criminal justice system, to make sure that we are not allowing bias in the criminal justice system, and some more oversight, some more keeping of statistics. But I think one of the most exciting things that came out of this is the governor issued an executive order. He signed a bunch of the bills last Friday, and he also announced an executive order to task every municipality and police department to sit down between now and April 1st and with the community, not as a closed process, but as an open process, with advocates, with the public, with the police unions, and with the civic organizations, and have a process to reimagine, rethink what is policing going to look like in that community and in this state going forward. And so I think this is a very positive step. I think that it is a model for the whole nation. We need to say, are these approaches that maybe have been around for 100 years, are they the right approaches? And there's going to be a community conversation in every community regarding this. So I think that's a very positive thing. But we cannot, I go back to the role that violence plays in our society, and how these situations escalate, and is that the mentality? It really can't be the case. And you see what happened in Atlanta, just heartbreaking to think that happened in Atlanta just days after the George Floyd situation, and how can a life be taken under such circumstances when this is on everyone's consciousness, that using police force in this way is unacceptable. So it's a moment to everyone to come together. One of the things, I've been to marches or rallies or protests or vigils in every community that I represent now, and in every one of them, there's been a sense of unity and a sense of common purpose. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to combat. It's bigger than law enforcement. We have to combat the racism that exists in corners of our society. And I said this on a few occasions, that we went through decades where I think we were trying to go in the right direction as it related to racism. And I think we've lost ground in the last few years, some of that coming out of Washington with messages being sent that are in the other direction. And so this is an opportunity where I think as a nation, we have to stand up and say, no, what we want our country to believe, to live up to its promise, and to reject racism. And so this is something that we all have to preach and make happen. And I think there is a unity of purpose throughout Westchester, the state, and the country to make that happen. Let's not lose this moment. Let's not lose the opportunity to make our country a more caring, understanding place. This is our time.
And we say these tragedies are making us go in the right direction now in battling racism and battling social injustices and restructuring our societies in positive ways to make sure that incidents like these don't happen anymore?
Well, I think we have to demand that is to the case. We can't just say, we can't move on to another issue, is my view of it. We have to say it is unacceptable. And I think that it starts at the ground level. It starts at the community level with conversations about racism and about all government services, to make sure that everybody is sensitive to everybody else in an understanding way. And we can do that. And I think that the public is going to demand that we do that. And I am part of that movement.
And I think you're using a word that should be a catchphrase for all this. Not make, but demand, as you say. Westchester Assemblyman Steve Otis, 91st Assembly District, Sound Shore area. We thank you for being part of the Cup of Joe political show here on Westchester Talk Radio. And let's talk again real soon. Thank you.
This was a pleasure. John, thank you so much for having me on, and we will do it again. And great to be with you and your viewers. And this is a great opportunity to communicate in Westchester. You're doing a great job. You've had a great career and a new medium to make this happen. Congratulations to you, John. Great to be with you.
Thank you. We do have to adjust based upon the times, and the times we are facing have made us demanded that we adjust this way too, and find different and new ways to do shows and put community events together, etc. By the way, Steve Otis, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to have you with us like it always has been through the years. Thank you. And
we'll
let's
do it
talk.
again too.
Much appreciated. Steve Otis, Westchester Assemblyman, 91st District, Sound Shore Area Cup of Joe political show, Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com online. I'm John Marino, and we are brought to you by, made possible by, our good friends at Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, White Plains Hospital. We thank everybody battling the COVID-19 pandemic on the front lines at White Plains Hospital and all the healthcare facilities and hospitals, all our EMTs and first responders around the area, Wartburg Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Mount Vernon, and also to our good friends at Park Sterling Realty and Michael Labriolo Landscaping Design and Construction. Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com, produced by Sharc Creative. That is Sharc, S-H-A-R-C with a C, not a K.